Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Screw Space podcast. Today I'm joined by Emma, and what we will be doing is debunking some myths, specifically around cyber threat intelligence. Why have we come to this? Why have we come to this topic? Well, a lot of people on the surface might view CTI as sort of technical dashboards, malware reports, endless logs, but there is so much more to CTI than just the technical and tactical side. There is the strategy side as well, and that's what we'll be sort of more leaning towards on this episode. And what we'll do is we'll do it via debunking some myths, or at least attempting to at the very least. So before we get into it, Emma, are you okay just to give the audience a little bit of a background to yourself, if that's okay?
Yeah, so like you said, I'm Emma. I am the threat and vulnerability lead for a CNI energy distributor in the Northwest. Um, I've not always been into CTI as a technical discipline. If we work backwards, I previously worked for the police. I was part of police digital service where we provide the MSP managed service for all of the police forces, monitoring their estate, providing threat alerts, vulnerability alerts, geopolitical context. The police get involved in a lot of different activities. So big events like the Grand National and Eurovision, we did a lot with them. That was before my time, but we did some stuff with them. And before that, I was in the army. That was, I would say, a quarter life crisis decision, if I'm completely honest. I left uni with a psychology degree, didn't really know what I was doing with myself, ended up back in a corner shop retail thing. And I just joined the army. It was just one of them things that you make a
Why not?
decision
Why
and
not? Just
you
join
end
in.
up,
Why not?
yeah, yeah. And I did intelligence in the army. So I was an Arabic linguist for 4 years. I worked on Russian intelligence just before the conflict kicked off. And that was like my real introduction into what intelligence is and all of the different disciplines. So you've got human intelligence, signals intelligence, political intelligence. And that kind of gave me enough to, on the outside of the army, realize that this was a thing.
Mm,
Because you don't, it's kind of still up and coming. When I left 3 or 4 years ago, it wasn't really well known that intelligence was a thing that private businesses need.
yep.
But knowing the value of it from the army, you can kind of sell it to different companies and different industries, and lots of money is involved. So you want to protect it, and that's kind of where I sit. And now doing it for energy, I am protecting all of the people in the Northwest from their power going out, but also the company itself from losing any information, any data, um, any industrial knowledge and services that we have is on us to protect that environment. And that's where I am now.
Fantastic, and it's lovely to have you on, Emma, and I'm really excited for this one. And I suppose what I wanted to kick off by asking then, Emma, is more so there is a view that sort of cyber intelligence is only for technical people. Then, what would your viewpoint be on that then?
My view is it is what you make it. So there is a technical aspect. And if you are technically minded, there's a whole area that you can sit within cyber threat intelligence, going through logs, understanding malware, understanding um, threat signatures in a SIEM, and really getting into that analytical mindset. There is an absolute gold mine of information that you could sift through. But there's also the other side, which is the strategic side. And I kind of bridge the gap between operational and strategic at the moment, where yes, you have your technical data, but what does that mean? Someone has to translate that into business sense and non-cyber communication. So someone has to do that. So that's where this bit that I do comes into it, where I understand the logs. I can do the technical, but the bigger problem is, what does that mean
Yes.
to the company? Is it a loss? Is it a profit? Is it destruction? Is it something that we need to look at from an insider perspective? All of these things, your leadership is going to ask you why. What does that mean? So
Hmm.
what? You need to translate that into the so what. So there is a technical, that is an aspect, but it's not just technical. And if you've got that mindset of I can talk to these people, um, and I can help them understand the risk of it, that's the place for you.
Yeah, I've literally just done a pod very recently with Dave Taylor and Sam Wheeler, and it's all about sort of we had a bit of fun sort of translating the military domains into the cyber world, and what we were discussing was how SOC is kind of like the front line. It's kind of like the soldiers, the patrolling units, and whereas like in the SOC, it's like checking for endpoints and making sure that there's been no breaches. Obviously, when there has been a breach, you escalate it to the sort of instant response team, but bringing it back. The SOC gets all their information and all their intelligence, which we'll get into in a little bit, is a question I want to ask you on that. Is it comes from CTI, so it's kind of like CTI is the pre-SOC is the right now, and kind of like IR is the post if you wanted to be very deliberate and put them in
Yeah,
boxes, just for this example. And like you say, it's the CTI's responsibility to understand the whys. It's to understand context. They are it's intelligence. It says it on the tin. So
yeah,
therefore, you can't just be on the surface like, oh, there is an attack, there is a threat, because you've got to get ahead of the game in CTI so that you are one step ahead, so that you're delivering the right information for the rest of the pyramid more than anything. So
yeah.
yeah, it makes complete sense that you've got to be understanding the whys. And I suppose that leads to me asking you then Emma, a little bit like, does it take a specific sort of person to work in CTI, or does it take a more well-rounded person? You need to be technical, you need to be tactical, you need to have that strategy, or is it welcoming of all parties? What sort of character works in CTI?
Yeah, I think it is welcoming. I think there is a place. CTI, like you just said, is very broad. And I think there is a place for every type of person. There's the people that just want to do the work, be an analyst, don't necessarily want to talk to the leadership. We need them. They're the ones that are translating the data into information. I then translate that information into intelligence. So
Mm,
then on the other side, you need someone that is very switched on. And part of my job that I try and explain to people who don't do my job is you have to read everything, remember everything, but only use a specific amount. And then I might see something in 2 weeks' time, and I'll have to go back into my memory and be like, I saw this 3 weeks ago. This is what this is related to. So there are some specific skill sets, and they can all be curated if that's what you wanted to do. You, I'm hiring at the moment for threat analysts, and part of what I'm saying to them is you just need to be on all of the time, be aware of what's going on, and just gather everything, because all of that information that you're gathering, 10% of that might end up as intelligence, but the 90% is irrelevant. But you don't know that until you've looked at it.
yeah,
And that's the same for the analytical side as well. So you've got your technical, hands-on, deep in the weeds, looking at the logs. You're looking at all of these things, and 90% of it is just rubbish. But you
yeah.
need to know what that 10% is that you actually probably need to escalate and dig deeper into. So it's the same skill, just in a different format.
And elaborate on that 10% then. How do you differentiate between information and intelligence?
It's really difficult because it depends on your environment that you're in.
Yeah.
So what was relevant when I worked in the army and when I worked in the police isn't relevant to the energy sector.
Mm,
You've got to balance up your estate. You've got to balance up who you interact with. There was a big thing about Salesforce in the
yeah.
news recently. That could have been major, but it's only major if you use Salesforce.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just an inconvenience
Yeah.
because someone else you use is using Salesforce. That's, for me, a prime example of information that turned into intelligence that we didn't need to action.
Yeah.
But you have to have that context around what that means for you specifically. You could see a vulnerability, but that's your information. There's a vulnerability on this asset, but we don't use that asset, so it's not relevant to us. It's not critical for us.
Yeah.
So that you're balancing it with what the information that you've got, and actually you're only as good as the information that you've got.
Yeah.
People think I can magic up the new threat actor model for the threat that hasn't been released yet, and we were ahead of the game. But actually, you're only as good as the information that Google provides you to an extent, but also the information that the people you're working with give you.
Mm.
So there's a lot of balancing of what you do know, acknowledging what you don't know, filling in the gaps for a what if. Um, So everything can be intelligence, whether you use it or not. It's applying it to what you're doing, who you're working with, what you're trying to protect.
I suppose my final question on this, and then I'll move on from it, is then from what you've said there, then how do you then communicate that to the non-technical people or the senior stakeholders in the business? Because if they're just seeing like, but Emma, I don't understand, but there is a risk to our business. There is a leaked credential, for example, or one of our supply chain uses Salesforce, for example, so they might have data on us, even though we might not have it internally. So how do you kind of get, is there like a risk prioritization matrix, or how do you get this across? Say like, look, I'm aware of the threat, but right now it is not urgent. It is important, but it is not urgent. How do you get that across to those
It's
people in the business?
exactly the way you've just said it. So you acknowledge their concerns. Everyone's reading the same news, and if you don't have that information that to confirm or deny, you make your own narrative. It's usually a very dramatic and extreme narrative because obviously the the ultimate risk is quite high.
Yeah.
It's on me then to do the research and understand what the problem is that they're reading, whether it's accurate. If it's not accurate, fill in them gaps
Mm,
and then explain to them why we need to be concerned. We need to be concerned because this credential is one of your senior leadership in finance. Probably needs to lock that down. Or if that leaked credential is an employee from 10 years ago who actually doesn't work for the company anymore, we have a different login structure. Yes, it's out there, but it's redundant now.
mm,
It's providing the context so
mm,
that you've got to think about what they're going to ask back.
mm.
So you're preempting those questions and you're answering the questions before they've even got it, which is a skill in itself. And that comes with time and experience of being caught out with those questions in the past and
Yep.
having to work very quickly in the background and answer those questions without looking like you don't know the answer.
Yep.
Um, but it all comes with time, like in any job, in any industry.
Yep.
You learn from your mistakes, and if you can understand your business and what their ultimate goal is, you can kind of alleviate any immediate concerns.
Yep.
And if it is a concern, you provide them a solution.
Mm,
Yes, this is a problem, but this is what we're doing about it right now, and we'll come back to you in 2 hours' time with an update, for
yep.
example. So the pressure's off on their end because they've got questions to answer for other people as well. It's not just staying at you. They're getting the questions, then it's coming down and down and down, and I'm the one with the answers.
And that circles back to why it is important to have that more sort of higher level strategic thinking, because that lends itself more to communicating cyber to the rest of the business as opposed to being purely technical. And that's why it's important so that we have that strategy side to CTI as opposed to just pure technical in the weeds. I'm not saying that one is more important than the other by any stretch of the imagination. All this is shedding light on the one that might not have more of the spotlight than the technical in the weeds. Just to finish off on your point there, I always sort of learn by using analogies myself, and I was kind of like thinking when you were saying like, look, in terms of how you prioritize these risks, and I was just thinking about my little boy like going out on his bike. It's like, okay, it's raining, so he will need a coat, but is it the first and foremost priority? No. Is it the fact that he needs to wear a helmet? Yeah, that's more up there. That's more important right now. Does he need to wear like a if it's at night time, does he need to wear a high vis? That's more important than wearing the jacket. It's the jacket will come, but what is more important, like if he has an accident, helmet first. And it's kind
Yeah,
of like that silly little analogy, but I always try and get it in my own words and then unravel it back into
yeah, no, and it makes sense. And ultimately, your job is to protect your child.
yeah.
So what is the first
Like a
thing you need to think
business
about?
has its crown jewels,
Yeah,
and
that's your
that's got
crown
to look.
jewels.
Yeah,
Yeah, a jacket's nice,
yeah,
but actually the helmet, like you said, the helmet is what's going to protect him if anything goes wrong.
yeah. No, cool. No, really well answered, Emma. So, kind of move it on then. I wanted to kind of ask you a little bit more about sort of how do sort of larger teams then actually, how does an organization with a large CTI function differ compared to those with a smaller budget? How do you actually scale sort of CTI in organizations? Because I'm sure that when you were in the army, the role of CTI and the role of cyber was at a gigantic, enormous level compared to like coming into the private sector, where there is still organisations that have very big teams, but on the grand scheme of things, not as big as the army, or at least not the anything below enterprise level. So
Yeah.
how does CTI differ between sort of sizes of organisations then?
The bigger you get, the more outputs you have. And that's what I've learned. So the bigger you get, the more you have to do. And it's like anything. If you've got 5 minutes to complete a task, you'll do it in 5 minutes.
Mm.
But if you've got all day, you'll find everything else to do to fill that time before you actually complete your task.
Yeah,
And when I was in the army, we had, like I say, dozens and dozens of teams providing intelligence for, I can't even tell you how many missions we were working on.
yeah,
But you have your specific area and you kind of become an SME in that area. And then as I've kind of gone backwards. I think I've gone from a large environment to a very small environment, and each bit along the way. So when I was in the police, we had, I would say, a reasonable team,
yeah,
but we weren't a specialist, but you find your niche.
yeah,
So everyone does everything, but you find your niche and what you enjoy more. Some people might be more on the malware side. Some people might really enjoy phishing
yeah,
and investigating phishing, or understanding geopolitical angles, which is what I really enjoyed. And now I'm in a different capacity where I'm leading the team.
mm,
I'm kind of doing all of those things, but my outputs are slightly less because there's only so much you can do with that smaller team.
yes,
But sometimes a small team is just as effective because you can have too many people trying to achieve the end result, and then nothing gets done.
yeah,
And I think everyone's been in that environment where you've been in a job. I used to work in retail, and sometimes you'd have a team of 10 and nothing gets done.
yeah,
But when there's a team of two of you, you are on it, and everything is done to the T before you finish your shift. And that's kind of the way you learn to be efficient.
yeah,
Um, and that's where you really drill your priority requirements as well, your PIRs. You know what you can do, so you find out what is essential to your CISO, to your senior leadership, and you just focus on them, and anything else is an extra. But
yeah.
you learn to be very efficient very quickly because otherwise you just drown.
A lot of your responses so far, Anna, do you think it links back to your psychology degree? Because I also did a psychology degree, and like I feel like we've got like quite a similar outlook on things. Do you think it has come into your line of work?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I think that is how I've ended up, not necessarily in the job, but approaching the job the way I do.
yeah,
Um, I'm not the most technical on
yeah,
the team, but I know how people work and I understand methods and behaviors and emotions.
yeah,
And if you can use those correctly, you can't really go wrong. And if you're just a human, everyone's just a human at the end of the day. Yes, it's a technical job, but we're not robots.
mm,
And that flips into the other side where I always say there's always someone on the end of an attack.
yes,
It's not just a machine doing it. So yeah, you've got your technicals, but actually if you can understand why this attack is happening, probably get to the same result.
yeah, yeah. I find it really interesting too because I feel
Yeah,
like I definitely well, basically I did A-level psychology, and then I did degree psychology, and by then I was like, I've either got to really really love it, carry on and do
yeah,
PhD and beyond, but I thought like by then I was like ready to jump into the professional life. But I do always feel like it has given me a good foundation of like I feel like I understand people, emotional intelligence, and it has helped in my world of recruitment and now sales. So it's just weird how psychology it just strands into everything because it's people at the end of the day, and to
yeah,
circle back to your answer, everything can be related back to the person behind the screen. It can be very, very simple to be like, it is just a robot doing it. And whilst we are sort of very much in the world of AI now, and there is obviously AI attacks, we are fine-tuning AI. We are the engineers behind it. Eventually, yes, generative AI is going to come over, and that's a
yeah,
scary thought for another day. But right now, AI is kind of like a turbulent teenager, and it is we are teaching it, and it is having a bit of pushback, but
yeah,
it's definitely getting very, very sophisticated. Needless to say, humans are involved behind every attack, and that links to my next point as where I want to take this, Emma, and it is I want to understand the more of whys behind attacks at the moment, because on the surface we are seeing that, like, yeah, money. Obviously, ransomware is a key thing, but I don't think it is just that anymore. And I think to the man on the street, they might just see it as, oh, ransomware gangs, they want X millions. But I don't think it is as simple as that. Political moves now. You work in CNI, like attacks against CNI can be seen as an act of terror, and it can be nations can go after sort of turning the power off on hospitals, for example. So there is a lot more to cyber attacks now on the geopolitical landscape. So what's your view on the why attacks happen? I appreciate it's context specific, but what's your thought,
Yeah,
Emma?
I think you're right. I think on the face of it, the ransomware and the financial aspect is what people see the most because it's the most punchy headline.
Yeah,
Jaguar Land Rover lost 2.6 billion
yeah,
because of this attack. But you've got it, like you say, you've got to think about the why. Why was Jaguar Land Rover in a pickle? Well, we'll never know ultimately because you're not going to talk to the people behind the attack, and they're not going to tell you the truth, even if you did. But there is a lot going on in the world. You've obviously got your Middle Eastern conflicts, you've got your Russia Ukraine conflicts, you've got China trying to one up every other country with the technology and the information that they have to build and trump what other countries are like military aircraft.
yeah,
China always wants to be the first one to get that technology out there because if you're the first one, no one can do anything about it. And then everyone else has to scramble and try and figure out how to one up that, even though that's their blueprint in the first place.
yeah, yeah,
So there are multiple motives. Finance is just the one that is very newspaper worthy
yeah,
because people understand money at the end of the day. But the geopolitical aspect, while it's so complicated and people spend their whole lives trying to understand why country A hates country B.
yeah,
And when I was in the army, we did a lot because I was an Arabic linguist. We did a lot of understanding the region, understanding the culture, and it goes back thousands of years, back to religion, back to the birth of land in whatever area. And to understand that is difficult to put into a short, snappy newspaper article.
mm,
Whereas if you can just say Russia hacked XYZ or China did this because I don't know Trump said something ridiculous, which is usually what happens. It's not the truth. It's not incorrect, but it's not the truth.
yes,
It's people are reading the sensationalized aspect of what's happening rather than and people who just pick up a newspaper in the shop they're not going to read into it. They're
yeah,
just going to they tell them what the Daily Mail tells them and then start talking about it. And actually these countries thrive on that. There's a lot of disinformation that comes out relying on the fact that people aren't going to do the work and whatever Facebook tells them is the truth.
yeah,
And there's this whole campaigns behind this, but that doesn't fall into financial gain and it doesn't fall into information stealing. It's just a case of messing with people's heads
yeah,
and creating a negative culture around something that's already a little bit tenuous. And
yeah,
we saw that with the Southport attacks
mm,
back in, I think it was 2023, 2024. There was a lot of mis and disinformation out there, which had no purpose whatsoever except to incite violence and negative vibes in the communities. And this was happening abroad. It was happening from Russia. It was happening from the Middle East. It was happening um, in countries that we would have necessarily thought were an ally. But whatever their spin on it was, really disrupted the UK's sort of social conduct, if you
yeah,
like. People did things that they would never have done normally because it was getting incited on social media. But that doesn't fall into any specific bucket of motive. So sometimes you just got to accept it for what it is.
yeah. I just find it so. There has to be a reason. No, I'm just so confused because, like, with the explosion of it, it's what you said there about spreading misinformation, and with AI deepfakes now, and like with the fact that people can literally make like someone in an extreme power like Trump and do like make his mouth move and stuff like that, and I think during he might have been president or he might have been part of his campaign, um. He had to double check, like, did I say that? Because he obviously says a lot of outlandish things. Turns out he didn't, and it was like obviously AI generated, but the fact that, and I am saying quite a bit here, but the fact that we have very limited, if not, I don't think there's any sort of like AI frameworks out there at the moment because we're waiting for this big AI reason to
Mm.
introduce the frameworks. I just think we are on the brink of something really like dangerous happening on the geopolitical space, um, that we won't be able to justify. Because like you say, like a lot of sort of sporadic attacks are happening, inciting violence. But I just think with misinformation, AI, deep fakes, the yeah, something dangerous could actually happen. And I don't know. I don't know where I'm kind of going with this. I just think that it's quite interesting. This whole strategic cyber intelligence. How do we even keep on top of it? Is the question.
Yeah,
How are you going to save us all, Emma?
I'm going to try my best. Um, it is really difficult because you've also got so some countries will conduct attacks for destruction. Russia against Ukraine is a very destructive force.
Yeah,
And that is their purpose at the moment. They've got specific groups doing these specific campaigns, but they've also got groups doing sneaky beaky stuff, which doesn't really link into their traditional MO, if you like.
yeah,
But they're also doing it. And then, so where does that fit into the bigger picture of what Russia wants to achieve? Sometimes, like the missing disinformation, like the deep fakes, it's just for the lols. And it's just because they can. And
yeah,
what can anyone do about it? Nothing. It just causes an inconvenience, and that sometimes that's enough. To,
yeah,
but then sometimes it's also a distraction.
yeah.
So you're seeing one thing happen, and you're focused on this other thing, and then behind the scenes, there's a bigger attack afoot, and all of your attention is focused on something that's completely irrelevant.
Mm,
So you've got to balance that up as well. And it's that 10%. Is it worth me looking at this? Can I kind of infer that this is a little bit cloak and dagger because I've just seen something else that no one's talking about but has the potential to blow up something massive.
mm. And it's not new, is it? Like essentially, it's propaganda. That's a big
Yeah,
tool in obviously in World War II,
in the
etc.
wars. Yeah, it's the same. It's the same activity on a different platform.
Yeah,
And back in the day, obviously, these things were a little bit more labor intensive. Doing propaganda back in the day, you had to print off all of these things and you had to physically go around and hold meetings and get people on board. Cyber has no boundaries now.
it's a
There's
click
no
of a button,
rules.
isn't it? Click of a button.
Yeah, there's no real sort of rules of engagement with cyber, and there's no accountability either. We cannot like confidently say this information came from this country or attribute something specifically to this group. You can only do a best guess. So it's kind of like the actual trolls that you'll see on Twitter and stuff. If you can't be held accountable, then where do you stop?
Mm,
And that's kind of what's happening. But it's also important to remember that every country is doing this against every other country. Like we name Russia because politically that's what the country does.
yeah,
But allies do it to other allies, and it's all about keeping yourself on the front foot.
yeah,
Um, so I read a report once, and it was talking about hostile actors, and the UK was named as a hostile state. And while logically I understand that, it was a bit of a shock to see that another country thinks of us as a hostile state because we get told the same as Russian community gets told everyone else is bad and we do the right thing.
yeah.
But actually, when you flip it, why does everyone want to attack us?
Mm,
We're not perfect, but we just get told we're doing all of this for the goodness of the community. But so is Russia, and so is China, and so is North Korea. So again, it all comes back to the narrative of the people, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah. Which is why context and this strategic cyber threat intelligence is so important,
Yeah,
and needs to be shown more light. And I think that's the best way we can probably put a nice bow on this, Emma, and kind of bring this to a close. And I knew I'd really
yeah,
enjoy it. I literally just looked down at time and it's just gone
yeah.
by like that.
We could literally go around and around in circles all day long and find another thread to pull
Yeah,
and put the world to rights, couldn't we? It's just one of those never-ending conversations.
absolutely, absolutely. And look, if anybody's got any questions or would like to challenge either myself or Emma on what we've said
Yeah,
today, please feel free to drop a comment. And yeah, obviously we'll get back to you on that one. But if anybody would like to reach out to Emma directly, I'll sure to put all her information down below. But once again, Emma, thank you very much for coming on the Screw Space podcast.
Yeah, thank you. It's been really fun.